Rewatch Podcast presents the Police Academy Film Series Rewatch. Join us each week as we go from the Academy to Miami to Moscow and revisit every film in the Police Academy franchise. Send your feedback to the Rewatch Podcast at gmail.com. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/rewatchpodcast or follow us on Twitter at rewatchpod. Today we're discussing Police Academy Mission to Moscow, starring Michael Winslow, George Gaines, David Graff, Leslie Easterbrook, G.W. Bailey, Charlie Schlatter, Christopher Lee.
I know.
Ron Perlman.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I did read that right. Greg Berger and Claire Filani, directed by Adam Metter. Welcome back to the Rewatch Podcast. I'm Cory, and I'm in the bathroom. Meet you there.
And this is Nathan. And why didn't Hightower or Hook show up for work today, Cory? Tell me why.
Poor etiquette.
Poor etiquette, seriously. Where were they? They're slackers.
Jeez.
As the guy in Back to the Future would say, slackers.
How's it going, Nathan?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Good. Good week. Yeah.
Yeah. You feeling a bit better, man?
Yes. Thank you for asking.
No worries.
But then I watched the Police Academy Mission to Moscow, and maybe I didn't feel so good.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that
later.
Yes. So how about we just go straight to the trailer?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
After half a century of opposition, the two largest world powers have finally begun working together. But now, just when we thought the Cold War was over, leave it to these guys to heat it up again.
May I kiss you again? No, you may not.
Police Academy, Mission to Moscow.
To kick many, many butskis.
Those fearless five from the Force are together again on a mission of peace and understanding. Because the Academy's finest will stop at nothing
Amerikansky police.
when it comes to fighting crime.
Do you have proof? Do we have proof?
They're not sitting down on the job. They're not being taken for a ride. And when it's time to use force, excess is best. They're about to show Russia just how ugly Americans can get. The Cold War may be over, but give them time. They just got here. Police Academy, Mission to Moscow.
We are in deep forest.
All right, we're back.
Okay, let's get into the trivia. 5 long years later, since City Under Siege, we have this film coming out August 26, 1994, Mission to Moscow.
You have to say, man, a bit of an afterthought and truthfully a last stab at success. Like this is the final chance for them to kind of make this work, isn't it?
Exactly. City Under Siege just tanked. So they gave it some breathing room, thought, hey, maybe we can come back strong. And you know what? No.
No,
It barely got released in theaters.
Well, this is actually quite interesting because I don't think I've ever really seen such a big budget feature do so poorly in the theaters. I mean, Mission to Moscow was barely released to theaters, and unlike all the other Police Academy films, Warner Brothers actually only released the picture in a token limited run, grossing a scant $126,247 in the US, making it the least successful movie in the series. Yes, and I actually, you know how we've kind of had a lot of trouble finding budgets? Well, for this one, I actually did. There was $10 million for this film.
Whoa.
And you know what? I think you can see it on the screen. You can see $10 million on the screen in this film. So to kind of do so poorly says a lot about the demise and how tired the public's appetite was for Police Academy films.
Yeah. And like you said, like you can see the 10 million on screen. They shot in Russia. They were there. They were in Moscow. So the money was spent, right? After watching the movie, it does make you think, did they have to do that? Probably not. I mean, like, you can get the odd shot of, like, the Kremlin or whatever in the background. the rest of it did not have to be shot in Russia. They could have gone anywhere.
I kind of liked that it was shot in Russia though. Like as I was watching the film, it kind of added extra layer of kind of, excuse the term, but kind of ballsiness a little bit about the filmmaking. Like, I mean, say what you like about Police Academy, but they've never been very adventurous films. And this one, they kind of stuck their kind of limb out a little bit and kind of went, okay, we got to do something different. Even in so far too, like they changed like the format of the film. The cast is reasonably different in this film. You don't have Hightower, you don't have Hooks, you don't have Mahoney. There's no House, there's no Sweet Chuck or Bobcat Goldthwait, nothing like that in this at all. Even the credits, like in the 6 previous films, when every movie opens, they have the same kind of opening sequence. It's like an overdub, isn't it? And then the Police Academy sign comes up. The intro credit sequence completely different in this one.
Yeah, it does feel very, very different. And at the end of the day, 10 million, I mean, that's not a lot. I mean, if any studio film for 10 million would be considered a low budget film for studios. Like, they rarely go below like 6 million. 6 million would be like bottom of the barrel, make a movie for us. So yeah, it's not like it was the world, but yeah, man, just looking at those returns, like they were banking on at least getting that 10 million back, and it just didn't perform.
They would have taken a royal bath over this film, if you know what I mean. They would have got totally smashed. So, unfortunately, after this film came out, the Police Academy franchise was put on ice big time. No one was going near it with a stick for a long, long time, were they?
Exactly right. It's done. It's done its part. And we talked about how Gutenberg was championing to get another Police Academy movie made. I think now's the time, It's been long enough. There's nostalgia for it. The 80s are coming back hard. Gen Y culture. I think if they were to do another Police Academy now, bring back the cast, throw in some cameos, I reckon it would do all right.
As much as I'd like to say bring Steve Gutenberg back, I'm not too sure if that would. Put him in as a cameo.
Cameos,
definitely.
yeah. Him, Jones, Hightower, all of them. Just let them all drop in.
Well, Hightower's dead. He died.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Bubba Smith died a year or two ago or something like that. So you couldn't do that. No, you're dead right. It is time to possibly bring it back, and it probably would do reasonably well. I mean, especially with the Zac Efrons of the world, I'm sure they would put their hand up to be a recruit, wouldn't they?
Exactly. You could do it. It would have a different tone, but. Yeah, these kind of goofy comedies, they're still good. People still make them today.
If you could make 21 Jump Street work, they could do Police Academy, definitely.
Exactly. Perfect example.
Yeah. And the tone of that film would be what they should kind of be aiming for a little bit with Police Academy. A bit risque, a bit silly, very kind of teen-driven almost, but still a little adult at the same time.
Exactly. Everybody can enjoy it. I enjoyed 21 Jump Street. I thought it was for what it is.
I didn't like the sequel that much, but the first one was okay.
But anyway, getting deeper into it, we do actually have some info on Bubba Smith and Marion Ramsey, our Hightower and Hooks, who did not return. It seems that initially Bubba Smith had made a verbal agreement to come back as Hightower in this. However, Marion Ramsey later called him up crying, saying that she was not approached to return. So, Bubba Smith, the kind of guy that he is, saw what was going on here and said, look, if she's not coming back, you know what, I'm not coming back. And she was actually really struggling at the time, apparently, Marion Ramsey, financially, and he was kind of helping her out as a friend there as well, So she was almost banking on, coming back to this role that was so familiar for her that she could make some money, but it wasn't to be, so the two of them kind of stuck together.
Like, let's be honest for a second too, I mean, none of the Police Academy kind of actors have really had big careers outside Police Academy. The only real one was probably Steve Gutenberg, and he only really had a minor career for 7 or 8 years during the 80s. I mean, he certainly kind of petered out in the kind of early to mid 90s and was kind of certainly stuck doing kind of B-grade, straight to video kind of stuff. I mean, not to take away his achievements though. He was in some, we've talked about it before, like the Short Circuits and the Cocoons and the 3 Men and a Babies, but those films are products of their time. It's the mid 80s to the early 90s. in those films. And as I said, after that, he really didn't go into that much. The rest of the actors did in their own kind of way, but I wouldn't necessarily say any of them had, like, are really known for anything outside of these iconic roles. Like G.W. Bailey is definitely Captain Harris. And I mean, Michael Winslow, I mean, I couldn't even name you anything else that he's actually been in, could you?
Not really. I mean, I know that earlier this year there was a made-for-sci-fi movie that was kind of like a mini Police Academy reunion in a way. So,
yeah,
like Gutenberg and Winslow were in there. I think Marion Ramsey showed up at some point, and Leslie Easterbrook. So, I don't know. I don't even know what it was called. I just remember seeing something where they were like, ooh, sort of like a mini Police Academy reboot. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. It's some cheap asylum movie that they threw these people in. So, yeah, these people haven't gone on too much. And like I said, you know, if sci-fi can capitalize on it, then why not try to make a Police Academy now?
Yeah, they could. They could totally do it, and they could probably do it for not that much money and probably make a mozza. Netflix, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Give them a call.
I know.
If you can bring Full House back.
Which I binged like 4 episodes of that. It's great.
I watched an episode the other day and it hadn't changed all that much, eh?
It's like it never left.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll get through the whole thing.
My question to you, though, is did you miss Hightower and Hooks in this film? Like, were you salivating for them to show up at a moment's notice? Because as much as I got to be honest, man, I wasn't really thinking too much about them when I was watching this.
Yeah, what would they do? I mean, we've been saying that for movie upon movie now. Like, they're given so little to do, especially that last one that focused so more on the new characters and Harris, that, you know, all these people who have been in every movie were just getting a short shrift. So really, you know, what would they add to it? The fact that they're not there, I mean, it's disappointing. It would have been nice for them to have made the whole run, but whatever.
But I don't think the film would have been better. Like, I can kind of understand from a script perspective that they left Sergeant Hooks out of it. And that's not me being mean or nasty. That's just sort of saying, you're right. What purpose is she going to serve apart from just being part of the crew? So anyway, it is what it is.
Exactly.
What else do we have, mate?
All right, so Michael Winslow. During the bike scene, when he's riding around on the bike, he unknowingly transmitted his noises across a secure military channel. And when it was investigated, they recognized Winslow from the previous movies and actually had a bit of a laugh about it. Isn't that random? I mean, like, this is Russia. This is just off the Cold War, and people are still skeptical about their quote-unquote new friends in a way. I mean, that comes through in this movie, but yeah, to sort of have this thing where you're making explosion and skidding noises and stuff and transmitting it over military channels, I mean, it must have been a bit of a shock for him.
Like, you got to remember too, this is 94. I mean, it probably would have been filmed in 93, you would imagine. So, like, tensions were interesting around that time in Russia, like, politically speaking. I mean, Yeltsin was in, and there was coups kind of happening all around the place, and the public were not in a very happy place. I mean, I can't really speak from experience because obviously I wasn't there, but just through kind of learning about these things, I suspect life was reasonably tough for a Russian back in 93. During that period. So it's not surprising that a military coup kind of took place, and it just so happened to be that it actually happened in the midst of shooting, of all things. Apparently the entire 52-member cast and crew had to retreat quickly when government troops began their October 4th, 1993 assault on the Russian Parliament building. Producer Paul Maslansky and director Alan Meader were lunching at the United States Embassy when the confrontation began. They decided to regroup with their company at the Hotel Gorbachev Finance Academy, which was about 5 miles from the chaos. After a few days indoors and confident that President Boris Yeltsin had actually regained control, filming was then able to resume. So you can imagine, man, it would have been pretty crazy being there during that period, yeah?
Yeah, you imagine just having to shut down your movie for 5 days, wondering whether or not the president of the country that you're in is still going to be president once it's all done. And
can you continue filming, if you know what I mean? Like, are they just going to shut everyone down? Like, it would have been tense, man, if you were a producer on this film. And, I mean, just taking the movie to Russia in the first place and filming everything over there. I mean, you mentioned earlier on about the idea that perhaps it was a little unnecessary, but did you not get anything else out of watching the film and knowing that they shot everything over in Moscow? Like, I quite enjoyed watching the scenery in this film. I thought it was quite nice.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, aside from a couple of shots where you get that unique Russian architecture, on the exteriors, I mean, so much of it is shot inside, so they could have just shot that in LA or something like that, They could have just gone over, spent maybe a week in Russia, getting some really good exteriors, and then, shot the rest in, not even LA, just another European city that had good tax breaks, People do it all the time these days, but they could have gone anywhere in that region and still had the same effect, I think.
Yeah, no, you're right. They could have come to Sydney, mate. They could have done anything. Director Alan Mead stated that out of all the films in the series, including this one, he was a fan of the first Police Academy movie only. So, yeah, man, not a big vote of confidence from the director.
Yeah, I mean, you and I pretty much recommended them all except for number 6.
Yeah.
Even number 2, we were a bit like, it's okay.
They're all fun. There's gags in all of them that are worth checking out. Definitely. And I got laughs out of, even 6 I got laughs. Even this one, there was 1 or 2 laughs. Nothing outstanding, but kind of, a couple here and there. But it's actually pretty interesting. I was having a look at Alan Mead's kind of filmography, but he was actually responsible for the Rodney Dangerfield film Back to School.
Oh, really?
He was the man behind that film at the time, and I remember liking that movie when I was growing up. I mean, that was made in '86 when, Rodney Dangerfield was totally at his kind of comedic height, the whole, take my wife, please, that kind of humour, which always kind of made me laugh.
I actually found this really interesting, and I did notice it when I watched the film, but did you notice that George Gaines gets top billing here?
I did notice that, actually. And he's in it, but he's not the top actor.
They do to him what they do in every other movie aside from number 5.
Yeah.
Is that they have him in there and then sort of shuttle him off to do side things.
Yes.
And then come back later.
Stare at his goldfish.
Yeah.
It's the first shot of the film that you see of George Gaines. I don't know if it's the very first shot of the film, but the first shot you see of Commandant Lassad is him holding his goldfish, staring at it. Yeah, I got an early laugh, which I wasn't prepared for in this one.
But yeah, I mean, it's just strange that he got top billing in this film. It's the first time, it's the only time.
I think in previous films, Bubba Smith had got top billing for whatever reason.
Well, Gutenberg, I think, probably got top billing in his 4.
But again, was Bubba Smith really like the biggest star of them all? Anyway, there's apparently a few scenes that were actually originally written for Bubba Smith. Apparently they include the scene where Tackleberry attempting to check up on Lassard in his hotel room, Callahan knocking down the henchman with a wooden plank whilst in disguise as a construction worker, Harris on stage wearing a tutu. Oh my lord, I'm so glad Bubba Smith didn't do that. For the Swan Lake number at the Bolshoi Ballet, Jones opening the door of the Canali safe, and as the blackjack dealer on Canali's casino boat. So Bubba Smith missed out on a lot, man, although I'm dare say he probably would have been reasonably pleased he missed out on this one.
Yeah, it seems like they all at least had a good time amidst all this stuff that was going on. They managed to get over to Russia and just have a good time making a movie. And speaking of which, this was the first feature-length movie ever to be shot in Red Square. They were right there.
So that's what I'm saying, man. Like, there's a level of respect for this film from my perspective, simply because of them having a bit of balls about them by trying to do something slightly different. Going to Red Square would not have been easy. It's like going to Tiananmen Square or something like that. It would have been really hard. Hats off to them for trying something new.
Yeah, and we did mention that Russia was on the table for number 6. They were going to call it Operation Glasnost.
Yes.
And, this came around, really, because it was Paul Maslansky. He's Russian descent. So he was the one who was really keen on doing this. So he's the one who kind of, put it together. And, of course, we ended up with Mission to Moscow because of it. Many
fans consider this the worst film in the series. I reckon that's debatable. Truthfully, we'll talk more about it later on. In an interview, Leslie Easterbrook spoke of the challenges of actually making this movie. This is actually reasonably interesting. Of making this movie in Moscow during the coup in which Boris Yeltsin's White House was burned. There was numerous delays shooting on location due to interference from local authorities. On one occasion, the cast and crew travelled in 40 vehicles full of equipment to the airport, only to be told they were not being let in due to the state of emergency, which caused filming of those scenes to be rescheduled for 10 days later. For the Gorky Park scenes, they arrived on location and were told by Russian officials they would not be shooting there that day. Cast and crew were often hungry due to a local food shortage. Leslie said the story never really gelled because it was impossible to shoot. So yeah, man, it sounds like they were up against it when they went over there.
Yeah, and again, like, they probably wouldn't have run into these problems if they just moved shooting of the majority of stuff somewhere else, and just relied on key, iconic Russian shots for just a couple of things here and there, So, I don't know. Sure, I can praise them for doing it, but still, at the end of the day, I'm not buying it. They should have just given up on it, really.
After City Under Siege, man, I kind of that it felt like the death knell a little bit. It was enough. Matt McCoy, showed up from Miami out of nowhere in that film, and it just didn't really kind of go. And this one, it really does feel like a genuine kind of afterthought.
Well, we also have Ron Perlman in this movie.
So let me restate that. The great Ron Perlman.
Ron
Perlman's great. Like, I really like him as an actor. He's a great actor.
In the mid to late 90s is when he really started to appear strong, good roles. But, this was an early performance to him, and quite honestly, he doesn't really have much taste for it either, because he actually says that he considers his work in this movie a public service by shutting down the Police Academy franchise for over 20 years. It has now been, 22 years since this movie.
Yeah, I mean, this film was made in 94, and I think I've mentioned this to you in a previous film, but he made a film in 95 called The City of Lost Children, which I told you about, which is directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who did Amélie and A Very Long Engagement and Delicatessen. And Ron Perlman speaks French throughout the whole film. It's a non-English role, and he's amazing in it. I mean, the film is absolutely amazing. I really highly recommend anyone out there to seek out this film and check it out. It's got Ron Perlman in it. It's called The City of Lost Children. It was directed in 95 and it was done by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Find it and watch it. It's amazing. You won't regret it.
And it would only be, 5 or 6 years after this, too, that he would be appearing in Blade 2.
Yeah. And Hellboy. And
Hellboy would come shortly after. So, yeah, I mean, he's going on to make massive stuff. Great actor. So, yeah, when he shows up in this and you're like, what?
Yeah, I know. I think that's the thing that's a bit disappointing about this one, man, is that the cast is there. There's nothing wrong with the cast. I don't think there is anyway. I mean, you got Christopher Lee, Claire Forlani, who the year after this, she went on to make Mallrats, man, in 95.
Yep.
And you've got, you got the old favourites there, like G.W. Bailey and George Gaines and whatnot, but obviously Ron Perlman, but it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of lacking something, isn't it?
It is.
That's okay.
And you can't put too much blame on the actors or story, because the director himself, Alan Mader, actually disowns this film. He disowned it before it was even released. He said that Maslansky just continued to interfere with his creative process. He was forcing more focus on slapstick humor, which is very, very present in this movie, rather than the way that Mader wanted to go. He wanted to do a humor of cultural differences, really bounce off the American and Russian way of life. So when the director isn't satisfied either, you can see why it's just going to fall apart.
Yeah. It's never a good sign when the director kind of says, you know what, this was a terrible experience, and actually disowns the film before it comes out. Like, it's just next to impossible to try and make that situation work.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, why it didn't become an Alan Smithy movie. At the end of the day, maybe it just got too far to release before Alan Mader said, look, this is just a bunch of garbage or something. But yeah, it could have just very easily just ended up being an Alan Smithy film.
It's a reasonably big deal to do the whole Alan Smithy thing. I don't think it's something that's necessarily taken lightly. Even with films that are considered terrible or bad or awful experiences, like from a professional kind of perspective, I think you're tarred with a bit of a brush when you literally disown a film by using the term Alan Smithy attached to it. I mean, there's been dozens and dozens of occasions where it's happened. There's been a few high-profile ones. The one that kind of springs to mind was when David Lynch disowned Dune. Didn't they muck around with Dune? And it was like there was like a director's cut, and he just took his name off it and just sort of said, I don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah.
I know there's been a kind of few others as well.
It's just a testament to what was happening, just how how it fell apart, really.
Shall we get into our main discussion? It's been a long bout of trivia, this one.
It has. So let's get into it. We are picking up reasonably later. It's been a while, and yeah, we open up with Commandant Lassard, like you said, staring at his goldfish.
Yeah, that's right.
As if, like, that's what he's been doing for 5 years. And he's called in his A-team because they are going to go to Russia to help them track down this, like, organized crime ring led by this guy named Konstantin Konali.
I know.
And like, they can't do it without the help of the Americans. And in the spirit of goodwill, you know, straight off the Cold War, we're all friends now. We're going to go and help them.
Yes, and he gets his A-team in there, and it's the usual crew. It's Callahan and Tackleberry and Jones, and can't even remember who else was in there. And Gaines is kind of saying, look, you know, there's the Russians are kind of taking over. They're even kind of starting to infiltrate good old America kind of thing, and we have to go over there and kind of take care of business. And before you know it, they're on a plane, essentially, aren't they?
Yeah, but they do have this whole bit where they introduce that for some reason now, Harris is like like the master of surveillance.
They've got that bit where he's talking to his A-team and he's eavesdropping on them through his surveillance equipment in the room next door, aren't they?
Yeah, he's got it like hidden in the plants, and they find like a wire, and they start to pull on the wire because they find it there, and they have to like yank him through the wall, and you're like, oh yeah, it's not good.
No.
It's not a good gag.
It's not a good gag. I think that's a bit of an issue with this whole film, man, is that the gags just don't really hit home as nicely as some of the other ones kind of have.
And it's just a contrivance too, so we can have Harris running around Moscow.
Keep in mind, before we get to Lassard's Police Academy, the film actually opens where you're actually getting these two newsreaders, and they're talking about this thing called The Game, which is actually like this guy playing like a Game Boy of some description, and there's this game that is kind of sweeping the world. It's made billions of dollars, and it's like it's got the whole world talking, and it's this archaic kind of Super Nintendo style game, isn't it?
What it made me think of was Batman 89.
Yep.
With the Joker, you know, putting the chemicals in the makeup. So they would keep cutting to like these news reporters who aren't wearing makeup, and they would look all disheveled and be reporting on, you know, this story about like, don't use these kinds of makeup and yada yada yada. I think that's what they were going for, but I think what they set up here at the beginning is that this game is like super addictive or something. So it makes you think like there must be some sort of like underlying criminal element that like makes you addicted to it, you know, some sort of, I don't know, like sonic sound or something in the picture or something. It goes nowhere except that he makes a second version of the game that helps him like break passcodes and get into military info and stuff like that. That's it.
The film doesn't muck around, because you're right, like in that opening scene with the two newsreaders, they quickly establish that Konstantin Konali, who's Ron Perlman's character, is the man behind The Game, and that's what it's. They literally just call it that for the whole film, and it's, you know, in today's modern world of video games, it's a whole different level. So it's like from the script point of view, to actually use this as a device as to kind of make you follow the film, it's a bit thin in from my perspective.
Yeah, and like I had a Game Boy when I was a kid, right? So they have the Game Boys there, and like for the most part, they don't even have the cartridge in the back. So there's like no game actually put onto the Game Boy.
Yes.
Something you didn't even bother to just like stick something in there to make it look like they're playing some game. Like it was it's like they didn't care.
So we've got mafia boss Konstantin Konali, who's actually laundering money under the guise of a legitimate business, which is actually the game that we just mentioned. The business is a highly addictive video game that allows him to bring down almost any security system controlled by a computer on which the game has been played, with a string of major robberies as a result. So there's something in the code. I mean, I never kind of got the impression impression that he was kind of that smart to actually kind of make this work.
Yeah, I mean, it just gets so confused.
Don't we meet at some point the guy who created the game? Like, isn't there
Yeah.
some character in it that shows up for like 5 seconds and he's like, we got to make a follow-up to the game. It's going to be called the new game or the next game or something like that.
And that's it. Like, he just makes the new game and suddenly, okay, now we can just access any computer system anywhere. And that's the whole plot. And the whole thing is too, like, you know, we saw Hooks being a bit tech savvy in the previous films, but she's not here. I mean, they could have written her into this movie.
Hey, Hooks, why did you bring up the tram subways?
So we don't have a tech person at all. We don't have Nick anymore either. He's gone. So let's replace him with this new cadet who is established as like a tech person because he's there and he's kind of flunking out and he's like, oh, you know, I want to be a policeman because my father was a policeman and so on and blah, blah, blah. And then he sees this list of people who are going on the Russia mission and he changes the cadet that they want to take to his name, but then is interrupted before he can change anything back.
Yes, that's right. I just noticed too, his name is Cadet Kyle Connors. Isn't that the name from Terminator, the first one? Kyle Connor?
Oh, it'd be a mix of the two. That's Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was intentional. Probably not.
Probably. Now, the guy who plays Kyle Connors is a guy named Charlie Schlatter. And have you ever heard of this guy before?
No.
Are you familiar with the very early Kylie Minogue film, The Delinquents?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He's the delinquent.
Oh, really?
He's the guy that she falls for and whatnot. This is a movie made forever ago, and I haven't seen it in like 20 years.
Yeah, I don't know the last time I saw it.
For people who aren't aware, Kylie Minogue is like a ginormous Australian kind of pop star, and she was also a soapy star in Australia in the 90s or the 80s, I should say.
And she was in Biodome, the Pauly Shore movie.
And she was in, wasn't she in a movie that you like? Isn't there a movie called a horror film that she made?
Oh, Cut. Yeah.
Cut. You like that, don't you?
Oh, yeah, it's like an Australian-made slasher film that had Molly Ringwald in it too. So that was a great movie.
So Charlie Schlatter is one of the delinquents for opposite Kylie Minogue. So anyway, that's just a bit of extra trivia. That's not related to Police Academy at all, but that's okay. Back to Charlie Schlatter, or Kyle Connors, I should say. He's kind of in this IT situation, and he convinces a girl to kind of erase a name of the people going to Moscow and to kind of just put his in, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And then he just gets like tangentially interrupted because he was going to change it back, because it was like a joke. And they're just like, oh, we need to see you, like, you need to climb a rope or something.
Doesn't Harris interrupt him somehow?
Oh,
I think it's... I could be wrong. I can't remember.
But it was just, like, a flimsy reason to get this cadet who is, like, bottom of the class, replacing the one who was supposed to go, who was top of the class. So he's there, and, like, he has none of the skills that they think... because it's written in the file, like he can speak Russian and, you know, he's like a computer expert and yada, yada, yada. But he's none of that.
Look, all I know is Lassard disappeared at airport. Organize search. Find Lassard, but keep quiet. What are you doing here?
Just browsing.
Hey, you're a translator, Katrina? Very good. She's excellent.
All our people are excellent. For instance, this
Moscow.
is Irina Petrovskaya. She is expert in forensics. She can tell you everything about person just by looking at one hair from head. Ow!
My observations conclude this man is picky eater, afraid of heights, and still a virgin.
What?
I'm not a picky eater.
Cadet Connors is also a forensics expert.
Maybe you'd be so generous to share with us your expertise.
Sure.
This one puzzles us. We were able to remove only one fingerprint from scene of crime. This is our only clue to identity of criminal.
Okie dokie. No wonder you're puzzled. It's glasses. It's all cracked.
Enough!
Next assignment, Chernobyl.
I would have loved it if this film stayed at the police academy with Charlie Schlatter's character and a new bunch of police cadets, and the only retaining character from the previous films was Commandant Lassard. I wish there was no Callahan, Tackleberry, Harris, or any of those kind of guys who all feel a bit tired and are not very convincing and not very funny. Truthfully, the stuff really early in the film at the academy when you actually meet a few new characters isn't that bad, and it's I kind of wish that was explored a little bit more.
It's something like, if I could relate it to something, I would think of something like American Pie, right? American Pie came out actually not too long after this film was made. About 3 years later, they made American Pie. And then they made 2 sequels to it, the original cast, right?
Yeah.
And then they went ahead and they made about 3 or 4 movies that just didn't have the original cast in it. And I think they're all like direct-to-DVD kind of things, but people seem to like them. I never watched them after the original cast left, but people who have seen them were just like, they were funny movies. They did pretty well with that. And then they did like an American Pie reunion movie where all the original cast came back, and that got a cinematic release and did very well. That's what I mean. Like, they could have done that. They could have just gone off in a different direction with a different group of cadets and made a whole series of new movies.
Well, they could have picked the pick of the bunch of the best comedians in the early 90s, you know what I mean? And got them kind of in there, because the rest of the guys, as much as I like them, they've kind of had their chance. As much as I like Michael Winslow and Sergeant Larvell Jones, he really hasn't done much for about 4 or 5 films now.
Yeah, and it's like we haven't seen it, but they did do a TV series that apparently had cameos from, Winslow, and Art Matrano showed up, and I guess the guy who played Fackler, I think, showed up, or something like they show up for like little drop-in parts here or there. They could have continued a film series.
Did you notice that there was no Proctor in this film?
Yes. I mean, they cut a lot of people. They get as many as they could. I mean, it's been 5 years. These people have moved on in their careers. They're probably doing other things now.
Well, I also suppose, man, the basic concept of the film is they get sent away to Moscow. They can't send everyone, I think. So they only end up sending like 5 or 6 people. So after Schlatter kind of makes himself aware to Commandant Lassard and the rest of the team, before you know it, they all end up on a plane and they're on their way to Moscow to greet Russian Commandant Alexandre Nikolaevich, who is played by no less than Christopher Lee. And you know what, man? I liked all of his scenes. I thought he was pretty good in this film.
He and George Gaines bounced off each other really well. Like, the two of them knew what movie they were in. And they just went with it, When they come off the plane and, they're like, Commandant, Commandant, and then Christopher Lee grabs him, kiss on both cheeks, big kiss on the lips. He does the whole bit where he's just like, may I show you to your hotel? Yes, you may. May I kiss you again? No, you may not. They were good together. The two of them, they knew what movie they were in. Everybody else was like, I don't know what everybody else was doing.
You can't really blame any of the actors for taking this gig. I mean, it must be hard as an actor to say no to stuff. And you know what, man? In 93, when this got pitched to them, or 92, or whenever it was, like, this was probably pitched them as a $10 million feature, which is not nothing. I mean, you're right. There are bigger films out there that are shooting with much bigger budgets and whatnot, but $10 million is not a small film. And you know what? The last film was 1989. 5 years has kind of been, maybe the public's appetite for a Police Academy film might be slightly more. That's probably what they were thinking. They've had a bit of a break. It's time to kind of do something new. So there's a reason why the cast of this film is not that bad. And, Christopher Lee kind of shows up. I mean, it always kind of amuses me, man, with Christopher Lee. Like, I don't think he says no to too many things, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, like, looking back on him now, I mean, you can see him as quite a prolific actor, especially in his later years before he died. He was in, like, Lord of the Rings, for Christ's sake. Like, an amazing performance there. But yeah, like, in his early days, he was known for schlock horror. He did vampire movies and hammer horror stuff. So
yes,
yeah, just dropping in to do this weirdo Russian commandant in Police Academy 7, like, why not?
So the whole premise is that Canali is kind of on the run, money laundering, Russian mob, and Lassard kind of meets the Christopher Lee character at the airport, and he then introduces him to the Russian kind of team, and then all of a sudden the cultural kind of differences kind of set in, and there's actually a really good gag, which actually sets up a reasonably large part of the film, is that when they're at the airport, Lassard is like, where's my car? Which car do I take? And do all that kind of stuff, and the new Russian kind of cop says, your car is at the front front, sir. And he goes, oh, fantastic, that's great. So before you know it, Lasard kind of walks out the front of the airport and literally jumps in the car at the very front.
Yeah, and it's a hearse going to a funeral. Best gag of the film, seriously. Every time they cut to Lasard and this like Russian family who has no idea who he is.
Doesn't he go to the funeral?
Yeah, he goes to the funeral, then he goes back to the wake, and then he's just like hanging out with them, doing touristy stuff. It is so funny.
It is so funny, and yeah, God, it's just. And meanwhile, the rest of the team kind of find themselves back at the hotel. But doesn't the policeman who sends Lasard on a wild goose chase kind of come up with this scheme by placing this guy in the room or something like that? Is that right?
Yeah, he gets like this weird bellboy who doesn't speak English to sit in the room.
But understands money.
Yeah, so, and his whole thing is like, if I have this guy in the room, whenever someone knocks on the door, he can tell them that he's in the bathroom. I'll meet you there. And every time they do it, he comes up with like some sort of different iteration of it. I'm in the bathroom. Meet me there.
And then Tackleberry will kind of look at whoever he's with and kind of go, oh, gee, Lasard must have it bad. Like, you know what I mean? And he's in the bathroom, out of sorts, Yeah.
There is like one of them. It's like right towards the end. I think it's the part where Tackleberry like pushes his head through the door.
Mm.
And he doesn't see the guy because the guy's just been sitting in the room eating food the whole time. And he's like so just overstuffed with food that he's taken a cold shower. Yes. And he's just in there like, I'm in the bathroom. That stuff also, I think, is actually really funny.
Captain Callahan, 511. Sergeant Jonas, 513. Sergeant Tickleberry, 514. Cadet Connors, 520. Captain Connors, 515.
Not exactly a four-star hotel, is it?
Well, we spend our police budget on fighting criminals, not on pampering out-of-town visitors.
It was your government that brought us here.
They also bring in monkeys for zoo, but we don't put them in four-star hotel either. Well, I just go check on Commandant Lasard.
As we were kind of saying before, they're there to kind of catch Canali. Canali's big plan is to make even more money by devising a new game, which we mentioned earlier on, by hiring the same person who created the first game. And it's up to the Police Academy crew to try and come up with some kind of scheme to kind of lure him out of hiding and kind of get close to him so they can kind of catch him, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course in the style that they do, they have a big screw up trying to do this.
Yes.
And I think they actually have like a couple of big screw ups before they get it right. And this, we cut to this whole bit with Michael Winslow on a bike. Like, there's these street performers doing bike tricks. So Jones has to like jump on the bike and make it seem like it's a motorbike or something like that.
Yeah.
And then these guys, Canali's men, show up and try to assassinate him.
Yeah.
So he's like flipping backwards and forwards while like bullets are ricocheting off the front of the bike. And again, like, it's that thing, like, I understand, like, this is what Michael Winslow does, and he's good at what he does, like making sound effects and stuff. They're always good. It's not that funny.
It's just not that funny, is it?
No.
Yeah, the jokes fall really flat. And there's even a scene kind of halfway to midway point of the film where isn't Callahan kind of like all of a sudden she's like a lounge singer? She's kind of gone undercover and she's trying to kind of get close to Canali, who's kind of in the audience, who once he kind of sees Callahan's beautiful kind of figure, he instantly falls in love with her, doesn't he? Well, when I say fall in love, he falls for her. He wants her. And she puts on this really sultry kind of, on top of the piano kind of performance, doesn't she?
Yeah, she really goes all out. I mean, they want to accentuate Callahan's looks in every movie. This one, they go all in with that.
Yeah, they do. That's right. So once Callahan woos Canali with her singing, I should say, Kyle Connors, played by Charlie Shatter, shows up and actually asks Callahan, can I get an autograph? And then this is in front of Canali, to Callahan. And then the bodyguard of Canali kind of steps in and says, hang on a second, go away. You're not wanted at the moment. Please come back later or another time. And then they get into a fight. And then I think Schlatter kind of puts the bodyguard on his ass. And then out of nowhere, Canali kind of offers Schlatter a job and said, you should come work for me.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
It's all very contrived. And, we said about the last movie as well, how there was, no love interest or anything. They dropped that thing. They bring that back here because Claire Filani shows up as she's like an interpreter that they've got. And her whole thing is that she was supposed to go on a holiday, but then the Americans were coming over and they put her on this assignment, so she can't go. But she wanted Connors to, speak to the Russian police chief guy, and tell him that she could go on holidays, and I've got this replacement here who's this overly obese woman. And of course Connors doesn't do that because he wants to woo her. And I don't know, the two of them, I just didn't buy it. I didn't buy their love story.
I didn't really mind him so much. I kind of felt like he was trying his best to try and make this kind of work, but he didn't really quite have the energy that he perhaps kind of should have. I mean, I think ever since Guttenberg left in Police Academy 4, even though we kind of, at the time, kind of argued that he wasn't really doing all that much in the films, like the last 2 or 3 films, it has kind of missed something. I mean, the Matt McCoy character just wasn't as good. I mean, it was not too bad in number 5, was okay. Number 6, he was basically just not there. And so they had to kind of find a replacement for him in 7, which is the Kyle Connors character. And he tries hard, but I think his material just isn't kind of up to scratch.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, they're trying to tell us that he's not very good at being a cop. He was failing at the police academy because he was afraid of heights. That was pretty much it. That was his downfall. The bane of his existence was that he was afraid of heights. So yeah, they go to this, Cirque du Soleil Russian-style thing, and Claire Filani talks him into getting up on the stage, and they put him up on poles, and he has to, overcome that fear. And then just, miraculously after that, she's, so in love with him.
Yeah.
And we can all go on this mission together.
Do you even remember how they got to the ballet?
I think it had something to do with somebody told them that there was going to be a big payoff or something.
Yes.
So they end up at the ballet, and of course Callahan's there with him as his new girl. And for no reason, Harris gets up on stage in a tutu. Because he can't get in without a ticket. And the only reason he couldn't get in without a ticket was because Claire Filani was there, and she's like, you can't come in without a ticket. And he's just like, you're all cops, just let him in. So yeah, so he puts on a tutu and gets up on stage. That made no sense.
One thing I do enjoy though is Captain Harris's total insistence. I think he walks in and he goes, "Oh, I'm an official police business. I'm an American police officer on assignment. I don't need a ticket." You know what I mean? And all that kind of stuff, and it's quite ridiculous. But you're dead right. In order to kind of get into the thing, he ends up on stage in full makeup. I would have accepted it if he walked on stage as a cop or something like that. But he was in full tutu makeup. And he was trying to imitate what they did. And you know what, man? That sequence would have cost the producers a bomb to put together. And it was ridiculous.
Yeah, you could tell that it must have been the Russian ballet company or something like that. This wasn't just a bunch of people in tutus.
It was the real deal. It was the Bolshoi Ballet. It was the ballet company. It was
exactly. And then Tackleberry's up there as well. Again, in full makeup. And yeah, seriously, I know this is just a stupid comedy or something like that. I'm just seriously, did Harris go in, put on a tutu, do his makeup and everything, just to get into this place where this payoff is going to go down, which ends up not even being correct anyway. It turns out that it was a big setup because he was just making a charitable donation at the end of the day, so it makes them look like a bunch of idiots. Man, it wasn't funny. He's this is supposed to be funny. Harris is up on stage in a tutu and Tackleberry's chasing him around the stage as well. It's not funny.
Now that Deadpool's worked, man, do you think they're going to make an R-rated Police Academy film?
You never know. Just hold our breath there.
You never know, man. The game has changed, hasn't it?
Yeah. Harris is such an ass in this movie too. It made me think of Die Hard 5, right? Which also went to Russia.
I haven't seen it. I've
Really?
never seen Die Hard. No, I never saw it. No.
Up until then, I was fine with Die Hard. Even the fourth one. People didn't like the fourth one too much. I was fine with it. I'm like, that's cool. But the fifth one just takes a big shit on the franchise.
You just like Die Hard 4 because it's got Kevin Smith in it.
He does actually have a good role in it. But the thing is that they're in Russia, right? And there's this scene where John McClane punches a Russian dude square in the face after he's run into his car, right? John McClane runs into this Russian guy's car. Russian guy gets out. He's angry, yelling at him. John McClane punches him in the face and says, "Hey, speak English." Oh my God. And I was like, you just said that to somebody in their own country, speaking their own language, right?
This is a film trying to make Jai Courtney a star.
That's what I felt like here in this movie. Like, Harris is just so arrogant, running around, doing his move it bit.
Still with his little stick as well that he takes everywhere with him.
Thinking he is the hottest shit because he is the American cop.
Yeah.
When you're in Russia, surrounded by Russian police officers.
You know what, man? They screw with him a little bit, man. There's quite a few gags in this. But isn't he like in the sewers or something like beneath some pipes, and they pour something down, and he gets covered in stuff? They really kind of, hammer Harris once again. But you're right, man. He walks around thinking he's the hottest shit. And truthfully, it kind of would have been nice if Harris kind of toned that down just a little bit for this film. Because, again, he's trying hard. Like, according to the trivia, man, I think he got brought in at the 11th hour to replace Bubba Smith, who I don't think Harris was actually meant to be in this film. And you kind of feel it a little bit.
Well, actually, while we're just on these, like, little side bits, what did you reckon of Tackleberry's bit, where he has to, like, demonstrate police procedures from an American standpoint?
Oh, God, I can't even remember when that actually happened. I don't think it had much of an effect on me. Well, what happened to remind me?
Well, we know that, like, Tackleberry's totally into his guns and stuff, right? So we're gonna have a bit with Tack and his guns. So there's this part where they walk into a seminar, right? Yeah, and they say, "You American police officer, come and teach us about American techniques." And he gets up and gets genuinely upset that he is being inhibited in his job because of excessive force laws.
Yes, and he goes on like a political rant almost, doesn't he?
Exactly. I can't beat people with my nightstick because that's excessive force. And I'm like, whoa, man, like this sounds personal more than it sounds funny.
Yeah. It wasn't that funny. It was a bit sad. It actually came across as a bit sad because before his obsession with guns and stuff was always like a funny kind of joke, but there was always a little air of seriousness about kind of the way he kind of did things as well. But you always kind of thought of Tackleberry as just like an extreme guy that just really, really liked guns, but he wanted to be like a really great police officer. That's the way I always kind of thought of him. And this time he kind of comes across as somebody who kind of thinks he's being reined in by the political kind of correctness of the age and all the rules and regulations. And like, oh, dude, come on, man. Like, seriously, you're right. It came across as a bit sad and just like, really?
Yeah.
So we're not far from the end of the film, are we, man?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. We've got Callahan and Connors who have infiltrated. And yeah, there's this guy who had developed the game to put the code in. And he's he's just there for a reason for the game to exist. He's a nobody, really, at the end of the day, for someone who's, like, so integral to the plot. He does nothing. Like, Canali shoves him in a box and then Connor finds him there later, and the guy just seems a bit loopy. That's about it. Yeah,
I know. So, and don't they nearly ship out the second game, which took 5 seconds to program, and don't they stop it at the 11th hour and they catch Canali, don't they?
Exactly. Well, after the thing at the ballet, of course he finds out that Callahan is a cop. He kidnaps her. They're being forced out of the country, but Canali kidnaps her, so they have to go after her and take care of business. But yeah, I mean, this is whole bit too with Canali. He's got her tied down to the bed.
That's right. And doesn't people kind of walk in and she's like, you can tell that she's uncomfortable. Like she doesn't seem to be too concerned by all this stuff.
Exactly. By the time they break in, Canali's already left, and she's actually made her way out of the restraints and she's ready to go. Yeah. Which is, that's her character.
You will pay dearly for what you have done. I know. You will marry me.
Wow.
Nice getup.
Thanks.
We're going to share everything.
Okay.
Right, bullseye. That's a fine cocktail. I cannot believe your obstinacy! You could have had it all. Instead, you betray me? I'm going to bury you. Ooh. What? I'm busy! The game is in the police station computer. Oh? I'm in! Yes. Now for the key. My secret code. Turn around. Yes. Everything ready at the warehouse? Got to go, Cupcake. I get in touch with you later. See if you change your mind. До свидания.
They tie it back in with Lassard, who just happens to be at Canali's restaurant, where he shows up after escaping. He has like a sword fight with Canali that he wins.
That's right. Yes. He has a sword. He actually has an actual sword fight.
So again, you know, Lassard saves the day at the end of it.
I know, again, apart from getting into that first car at the start of the film and running around with that family for 2/3 of the film, he really doesn't show up all that much. This is for a guy that gets top billing, for God's sake.
So, you know, that's pretty much at the end of it. They all, you know, yay, we saved the day for the Russians and we can all be friends.
That's exactly right. So that's kind of where we are.
What do you reckon? Ratings, recommend?
You know what, man? I'm going to give this a 3 Commandant Lassards out of 10, maybe 4. I'm going to jump up to 4. I would have given it a bomb, but the fact that they went to Russia and they filmed in 93 during a reasonably volatile period, and I actually did enjoy looking at the scenery in this film. I'm a sucker for stuff like that. I like location work and when I kind of get a sense of the country, and I did get a sense of Russia in this film. I thought it was ballsy for them to actually try something different, and it was a gamble that didn't pay off, and you know, would have been nice for them to maybe try some new things with it as well. I mean, as we kind of discussed earlier on, it would have been nice for them just to kind of go back to the academy with a new bunch of recruits, with the link being Lassard, and I think that would have been just fine. But for whatever reason, they went in a different direction, and the film, the script, the acting, the gags, most importantly, the gags just don't really work all that well. So yeah, 4 Lassards out of 10 for me.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give it 4. It's hard to say which one I like the least between 6 and 7. You know, I still think I liked 6 less than I liked this. You know, this at least had George Gaines. We could cut away to him here and there doing some things. And then, yeah, you got people like Ron Perlman and stuff who do fine, you know, in this movie for what it is they're doing. I did like that. But yeah, just the story is just so garbage. It just makes no sense.
It's so garbage, isn't it?
It really is. It makes, it's just nonsensical. I don't know why they went with this. They had 5 years to come up with a good script.
I'm going to put you on the spot. What's the best film of the franchise?
The first one.
You reckon?
Yeah, I'm going to say the first one, and then the fifth one, which I really, really liked. I love that tone. And then, oh man, if I really had to think about it, Back in Training, that was pretty good. Then 4, then 2, 7, 6.
Wow. Truthfully, I think I love the third one. I think the third one's really funny because it's the whole Bobcat Goldthwait thing for 2/3 of the film and Sweet Chuck. I really miss those 2 characters. I would have they should have pissed off Hightower and Hooks 3 films ago and brought back Sweet Chuck and Bobcat because those 2 were great and they were really kind of coming into their own as kind of the film kind of went on a little bit too. So 3 and 1 and probably 4. Probably my least favorite is probably 6 and 7 and 2. I don't really like 2 that much.
What about 5? I think you
5's great. Right? Yeah, 5's great. Yeah, I did. Yeah. 1, 3, and 5 are kind of my favorites. Nice. Definitely, for sure. 5 was great, man. George Gaines's character in that is gold. And as much as the whole kidnapping thread with the 3 kind of Miami kind of no goods is a bit ridiculous, you do buy into it, man, because there's some good gags in there with George Gaines and all that kind of stuff. stuff. And yeah, man, like he passed away a couple of weeks ago. I'm still a bit bummed by it, you know, especially kind of when I was watching this the other day. So it is what it is, and we'll always have these movies, so that's okay.
So just reminding you guys, we always have feedback sections on the show, so if you ever just want to send us feedback on anything we've ever talked about here at the Rewatch Podcast, then feel free to do so. You know, we were calling it the Citizens on Patrol segment for this, but we're pretty much, well, we've come to the end of Police Academy, so...
We have.
Yeah, we didn't get much feedback from anybody out there, so we hope you're out there listening at the very least and enjoying watching the movies along with us. But yeah, always feel free to send us some feedback. We'll be giving out our info towards the end of the show.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, let's stay in contact, and we hope you've enjoyed the discussion. We've had fun watching them.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall we play a game of Who Said This?
Let's do it.
Count me in.
You ready? This is actually quite a funny quote, actually. Okay, 3, 2, 1, scene.
You know, in America, funerals are in English.
Such a stupid line.
It's like I said, some of the best stuff in the movie.
I know.
So yeah, so if you think you know who said that, hit us up on our social media, or Twitter, Facebook. Use the hashtag Rewatch Quote. Get involved. It's a bit of fun.
Do it. It's good fun.
All right, so our next episode. All right, this is an idea that we sort of had, right? I guess giving context to why we're doing this. You know, I host several podcasts, and coming in April, 2 TV shows that I do review podcasts for are coming back. So I'm going to be quite busy over there.
Yeah.
At 12 Monkeys Uncaged for the sci-fi show 12 Monkeys, and the C Word podcast, which I co-host for Orphan Black. So I'm going to have a lot on my plate from April.
So we've come up with a plan, haven't we?
Yes, we do have a plan to get into another big film series rewatch.
I don't want to reveal it, but there's about 10 or 12 films in that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a big rewatch.
Big one, yeah. So we're going to go ahead over the next few weeks and sort of record some episodes that we can put out here and there as bonus content for the Police Academy Rewatch. And these are films that we kind of feel fall into the same genre of comedy in a way. So, and they're smaller film franchises that we feel we can cover as bonus content without having to do a big hoo-ha about, these are the films we're talking about. So, the next episode, we will be discussing Weekend at Bernie's, and then following that up with the sequel, Weekend at Bernie's 2.
Yeah, that's right.
And then once we're done with that, you're going to get 3 more bonus episodes as a part of this series, and we're going to be discussing the Naked Gun films.
I can't wait to watch those again because they're funny. They're really funny.
And these are episodes that we're going to put out, just when we find the time over the next couple of months, just to sort of fill the film rewatching void until we can come back strong with our next big rewatch series.
But that's not to say that the Rewatch Podcast is stopping. I mean, you've got your other show on with Tom that you're doing as well.
Absolutely. We're just a couple of episodes away from wrapping up our Sliders rewatch. We're coming to the end of season 5 there, and then once we're done there, we are going to be picking up with Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. So
I know, Dean Cain.
Yes,
Terry
really
Hatcher.
looking forward to that.
Nice.
So yeah, a lot of content still coming out, but yeah, we'll get back into the big series film rewatches in just a couple of months.
Exactly. So that's it for this episode of the Rewatch Podcast. Keep up with listener interaction by joining our Facebook page at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at RewatchPod, and visit our webpage, rewatchpodcast.podomatic.com.
And you can always write us an email or record a voice message and send it over to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. And also, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a rate and review on iTunes. It just helps really build up that search result ratings and helps people find the show easier. And you can also help support the work that we do here at the Rewatch Podcast by heading over to patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast, where you can make a monthly contribution as little as $1, and it just helps us keep the lights on around here. Well, I'll just say until next time, great subway. Terrific. I mean, New York is a shithole, but this is great.
In tribute to the great George Gaines, Commandant Lassard, there are many, 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 many great Police Academy films, so many laughs to be had. See you next time.
The Rewatch Podcast is not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended. The use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided in Title 17, aka Fair Use. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Copyright 2016, The Rewatch Podcast. Hi, Rewatch Podcast listeners. I'm Cory.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Nathan.
First off, let me say that we have all had a blast doing the Rewatch Podcast. Every week, we put out another episode for free for you. And although we enjoy these discussions with each other, we truly do this for you guys out there in podcast land.
That's right, Cory. But we are here today to tell you about Patreon. Every week, there are costs involved in podcasting about film and television, including hosting and bandwidth charges, our own personal internet usage, and film or show rentals and purchases. So, we're asking you to become a Patreon supporter.
If you can afford as little as $1 to throw our way per month, it would really help us keep the lights on. And if you want to send $100 our way every month, we wouldn't turn that down either. But it's your choice, and we appreciate the support you bring.
As always, we strive to bring you the best quality shows we can create, and we hope that you enjoy them. So head on over to patreon.com/rewatchpodcast to become one of our patrons and show your support for the Rewatch Podcast.
And if we get enough patrons, we may even be able to produce exclusive content just for the supporters in the form of simply getting episodes before the main feed release, or even bonus film discussion episodes as a thank you for your support. The website again is patreon.com/rewatchpodcast.
Thanks, everyone.